The Vatican is famous for being the smallest country in the world. With an area of just 0.49 kilometers, it is also made famous by the fact that it has no airport. In fact, the closest airport to the Vatican, Rome Fiumicino International, is 32 times bigger than the Vatican itself. So, with the increase in papal travel over the last few decades, how does the Vatican's most famous resident visit his subjects across the world? Without any sort of airport or air transport of its own, airlines are often chartered in to conduct papal air duties on behalf of the Vatican. To set it apart from regular air traffic and highlight the significance of the flight's passenger, the papal aircraft carries the call sign Shepherd 1 when conducting official Vatican business. Traditionally, these flights are conducted by the Italian flag carrier, what is now ITA Airways, but was historically Alitalia for the majority of the Pope's overseas visits. This isn't always the case, though. For example, during Pope Francis' visit to New York in 2015, an American Airlines Boeing 777-200ER was chartered to fly the Pope from Rome. Interestingly enough, though, this flight did not carry the Shepherd 1 call sign because on this trip, the Pope was invited to the U.S. Conference of Bishops rather than conducting an official Vatican-organized state visit. The aircraft the Pope will use is usually based on the requirements of the trip. Instead of only one kind of aircraft being available, as in the case with most governmental aircraft, the Pope has whichever aircraft it charters at its disposal. When using the ITA Airways or Alitalia fleet, that can include aircraft as small as an Airbus A320, up to the likes of the Boeing 777 or Airbus A350. This will all vary on the itinerary of the trip and what that entails. For example, if no oceans need to be crossed or minimal cargo is needed, or if it's just a short trip, then an A320 will do. However, for long-range trips or higher capacity trips are on the cards, then a wide-body might suit the papal needs more. The Pope never travels alone. In addition to the flight crew, he will have a number of his own staff, but also usually 60 to 70 journalists that have been selected to cover the trip for the media. The Pope and his entourage will generally sit at the front of the cabin in business class, which is naturally curtained off to the rest of the cabin, and the media will sit in economy. While there may be a separation in class, it is common for the Pope to come to the back of the cabin and say a short speech to welcome and thank the journalists, as well as to hold a small press briefing. Flying the Pope is far from a regular passenger flight. While the cabin seating configuration is usually left as is, the onboard service is very different to a regular charter flight, and this goes down to the finer details. For example, the headrests are adorned with the papal coat of arms. Additionally, while the press will be sat in the economy class cabin, they will not be served an economy class meal. Instead, they traditionally receive something closer to or even exceeding a business class meal, with trays of finer foods than any regular passenger could ever expect. Often, the press might also be given a gift as thanks for covering the trip in the first place. The press will usually be divided into language groups, split across Italian, German, French, and Spanish, the largest 4 Catholic languages. However, local journalists specific to the countries the Pope will visit will also be present on board the plane, who will be addressed first. The Pope will usually allow for the conference to go on for as long as necessary, instead of having a set length of time. Sometimes, these press conferences can last up to 20 minutes before landing. The flight crew, too, are usually in high spirits. Naturally, with them being picked for this flight for their quality of service, the fact that they have been picked for such a historic flight is a career highlight. Papal trips can often be multi-city affairs, rather than just a single city visit. Therefore, while on board, the Pope himself will also have a briefing on the situation on the ground where he will be landing, and therefore be made aware of what subjects to be aware of and what details to emphasize. Because he is the head of the Catholic Church, the Pope has to be a symbol of hope to his subjects and aims to be that very symbol worldwide, attempting to build bridges wherever Shepherd 1 lands. The Pope will usually travel to areas of high Catholic populations, of which there are many all over the world. He may also visit the scenes of recent disasters in a sign of solidarity and reassurance to local populations. But in recent years, Shepherd 1 has landed in some far more unexpected places, such as the United Arab Emirates in 2019, and more recently Iraq in 2021, in order to try and build relations, tolerance, understanding, and acceptance between Christianity and the Muslim world. When Shepherd 1 lands, the airport will usually remain open, as opposed to the likes of Air Force One or equivalents, where the airport can be closed for up to a half an hour to allow for a complication-free operation. It is still a state visit, though, and is therefore very ceremonial. As a result, upon landing, the cockpit windows of Shepherd 1 will be opened, and the flags of the Vatican and the host country will be raised. This is often a red carpet affair, and he will be greeted with a guard of honor from the host country. The Vatican doesn't have its own fleet of aircraft because it largely doesn't need them. While international papal visits have become far more frequent in recent years, they are still not of the frequency that would justify the cost associated with owning and operating a plane of their own. A country's leader may often fly domestically as well as internationally, therefore increasing a plane's likelihood of being used more. However, for the Vatican, a country that has the length of just over 14 Airbus A380s, domestic air travel is impossible, negating the need for even a helicopter. Over the years, the Vatican's relationship with Alitalia and later ITA Airways has been very constructive and mutually beneficial to each party. And with the very meticulous planning of papal visits months or years in advance, having a plane on constant standby simply doesn't fit into the Vatican's needs. Papal air travel is much like the air travel of any other head of state. A plane is acquired for the Vatican's personal use on the trip. The press are invited too, and have the chance to converse with the Pope on issues concerning the trip. What sets papal flights apart is that these flights often signify an effort for unity and hope across the Catholic world, and an effort to build bridges between Catholic and non-Catholic worlds. The landing of Shepherd 1 will be an effort to promote cooperation and remove politics from the equation to make for a greater, lasting bridge of friendship between parties.